Alrighty. Oh, let's see. Hey everyone. Just going to add Charles to this chat. Give my internet a second to catch up. There we go. All right, legends. Okay. There we go. Hi, Charles.
G'day, Evelyn. How you going?
I am good. How are you this fine, glorious Monday?
I'm very well, actually. Yeah.
Good, good, good. So I've been really looking forward to this chat and to give everyone a very quick, hi everyone that's jumping on. Thanks guys. Thanks for jumping on. I want to give everyone a very brief rundown, and then I'm going to pass over to you, Charles, because I want you to give them the full story of what you've been through. But to everyone that's jumping on right now, I came across Charles's page a few months back, and you were actually in the middle of a live, Charles, and I could not turn it off. I was glued to it because Charles's story, everyone, is mind-blowing. There we go. It's mind-blowing, guys. So the reason I thought it's a really valuable time for Charles to be sharing this with us is because it's something that happened decades ago, guys. However, it's a little reminiscent of what we're going through present day, and something that you're going to find upon hearing Charles's story and what he's been through. I think the part that is very sadly reminiscent of today is the lack of accountability and the lack of responsibility that anybody has stepped into. Basically, nobody has owned up to what Charles has been through, and Charles is one of thousands. So thank you so much for joining us, Charles. Charles is president of Infected Blood AU. Please do head over to that site afterwards, hit the follow, and continue to learn about his journey and the ways in which he's still to this day trying to seek some justice. So Charles, thank you so much for being here.
G'day. Yeah,
And,
thank you for having me.
Thank you. So do you want to run us through the very start of how this all began to unfold for you?
Well, how the contaminated blood scandal unfolded for me was I was a kid with a bone marrow failure. The disease is called severe aplastic anemia, and I think that's Latin, although I don't speak Latin. I think it's Latin for bone marrow failure, right?
Yeah.
So I had this disease, and the only cure is a bone marrow transplant at that time. Mm-hmm. And actually, this disease was famous at the time, or infamous, although it's extremely rare. It was famous because there was a kid called the boy in the bubble, or the boy in the plastic bubble. And actually, they made a television movie about it with John Travolta.
Yes, yeah. I haven't seen it, but I knew it's got John Travolta in it.
TV movie. And anyway, so I get this disease, and I go to hospital, and they say, well, you've got to have blood products, and blood transfusions, things like that. And so what happened is that, okay, I understand that, but I also understand that there's other patients like me, other kids, and I knew of a kid that went to my school who was a boy with a bleeding disorder known as haemophilia, which is also rare, but not as rare as what I have. I have a bone marrow failure.
Yep.
These kids had a bleeding disorder that's not always fatal, or they're not always going to bleed to death. In many cases, they receive blood products as a treatment, okay? Sometimes just to stop disfigurement or discomfort and things like that. And in the 1980s, there was a lot of use of blood products, a lot of use of blood. And I received these blood products to treat my severe aplastic anemia. And children with this bleeding disorder, haemophilia, also received a blood product called Factor A, okay? And it was at that time, in the mid-80s, it was actually before I was being treated, that I became aware that there was a kid that went to my school who I'll just call today as H. I'm going to describe him by his legal term, and I'll explain a bit that in a moment. But I was aware that a kid that went to my school, who was my age, he was 11 at the time, that he was given a contaminated blood product for some bruising. Okay, this is in New South Wales. And that blood product gave him HIV. and he developed AIDS. And what amazed me was in New South Wales. Where are you at, Evelyn? Whereabouts?
I'm in Melbourne, everyone. So I'm in Melbourne, Victoria. Yep.
G'day, Victoria. And we've got a lot of members from Infected Blood Australia, a lot of people that support victims of this contaminated blood scandal down there. So g'day, everybody.
Yep. Yep.
But basically, in New South Wales, you had New South Wales and Gladys Berejiklian is our Premier. She's locking everyone down at the moment, ostensibly over this COVID and Delta and whatever else they'll come up with, perhaps. But okay, but here you go. But in New South Wales, right, you've got this child, and he has received a contaminated blood product, and he's got AIDS, and he's dying. And in the 1980s, this was a seriously scary disease at that time. Oh boy, was it scary. And what amazed me was that the New South Wales state government and the federal government would give no help, they'd give no aid. This boy's parents were desperate to get help because they required nursing, home help, all these sorts of things that cost a fortune. And this was a very scary, frightening and costly disease, costly virus at that time. And the governments just shut the doors. They would not help. That made me think something's wrong, because Australia is a very generous country, very, very generous. You know, we're so generous and kind, and it's just not us, is it? So then when I got my blood products, I sort of thought, well, this is in the 80s, I sort of thought, you know, I might get a virus off this. And that's why I started actually, I didn't think I'd necessarily get HIV, but I thought for sure I'd get something else, a hepatitis, perhaps something. And that's why when all the denials, there were denials in the early 90s, in the 80s, that the blood supply was unsafe. And so basically I've had to investigate and go through that and keep peeling back the onion. And here I am today, 35, whatever years later, how many years later, and we're still fighting to get a Royal Commission. And that's basically what this is about. It's about how tens of thousands, this is what my investigations over the years have shown, is that I wasn't alone. I wasn't the only kid. There were lots of kids like me, kids who used blood products or kids that were given blood transfusions. There were lots of patients. There were lots of women that were given blood transfusions when they were giving birth. You know, in the decades before the 2000s, thousands of them, thousands of women, thousands of mothers were infected with hepatitis C around Australia. No one knows about it. So this is what we're about. We're trying to get an inquiry into our biggest blood scandal.
Yeah. And do you have a rough figure, Charles? Or because I know it is in the thousands, and I'm not sure if it's potentially into the tens of thousands, but do you have a rough idea of how many thousands of people were knowingly, which Charles will get to that as well, knowingly given these infected blood transfusions containing both AIDS or Hep C?
Well, in the case of blood products, now these, I spoke earlier about people with the bleeding disorder haemophilia, okay?
Yep.
So these blood products that were given, they received a treatment in the 1980s called Factor VIII. And we now know from evidence we've got, we now know from the inquiry that's taking place right now in the United Kingdom called the Infected Blood Inquiry, okay, that this Factor VIII product, they knew that it was contaminated before it even came to Australia. It was used in the UK before. The British authorities lied about its safety in 1974. That's now proven. And so this product came here, and parents were persuaded to give it to their children who had haemophilia, and other patients were coerced into this. You know, they were coerced. They were manipulated off safer products onto this product. Okay. Well, what we know is that an estimated up to 2,000 Australians were infected with hepatitis C from those blood products, and basically, I think it was 1,350 were infected with HIV from that blood product, and 1,400 haemophilia were killed by the Factor VIII blood product in the 1980s. Now, you've got to remember, this is a rare disease. So guess what? Pretty much 100% of Australians with the bleeding disorder haemophilia who were provided blood products by the Australian Red Cross and by the jab maker and blood products maker CSL were infected with viruses. So they were done knowingly. That was knowingly done. Now, in the situation of blood transfusions, right, well, the evidence here is pretty staggering. Some of the crazy things that went on with blood transfusions, I have to say, we're going to have a legal investigation. It's definitely going to have to happen. Every lawyer that's looked at it now, it knows, because we've got stuff that, we can show that they were, the Red Cross was sending blood vans to prisons, okay? And they were doing this right up until 1983, okay? Now, this is not being disparaging of anyone that's been incarcerated in jail, no, not at all. I've known people who have been, and full respect to them. But it's actually about the exploitation of prisoners. And so what was happening was there was this unholy relationship between the Australian Red Cross, this is the managers of Australia's voluntary blood supply, and this blood products company, CSL, and jab maker CSL, okay? And so they would send mobile blood vans to prisons where they knew from the best science advice, the best health advice from around the world, not to do it. In fact, the Canadian Red Cross said, stop sending vans to prisons because prisons were very problematic for hepatitis. The Chopper Read, you know him, Mark Chopper Read, he actually, he said, just a little bit before his death, he said that he got his hepatitis C, he got hep C from Pentridge, right, in Victoria. Well, guess what? Where do you think CSL and the Red Cross were sending their blood collection vans to, right? And so the Red Cross would actually distribute blood transfusions from prisoners. And so that was criminal for them to do that. They knew that that would lead to infections, right? We also have situations where they were advertising in high-risk donors in the 1980s. So when we say knowingly, they made the most reckless decisions. They used to send mobile blood collection vans to prostitutes in the 1980s who were looking to get cheap and discreet HIV tests, but then they'd infect the blood supply with hepatitis. So we're talking about, I think what we're going to find is probably, I think the fact that the government didn't do anything really to help victims, the fact they didn't provide any support, and the fact that they did it knowingly, I think we're going to see people going to jail in Australia.
Yeah, I hope so. I was really stunned, Charles, in the video that I think I was watching, or maybe it was another video after that with you in a live, you were explaining that there's actually a somewhat simple way to treat these infected blood samples. However, that was going to cost them a little more money, and so they didn't. So guys, these are conscious decisions that businesses make where they can provide a better service and a better product. And because it might cost them a little bit more money, they didn't. And it's actually cost thousands of people's lives in the process. The reason this is so important for us to be hearing here now and today is because is that not sounding and feeling very familiar to us all, where particular authorities, manufacturers, people that we're meant to lean on and actually trust, they're not wanting to take accountability or responsibility if anything goes wrong once you use their product. That's the mind-blowing part. And Charles's story was, this was decades ago. We need to stop these patterns. We need to stop these patterns dead in their tracks, because when does it end, guys? This happened to Charles decades ago. That's why I thought we need to keep shining a light on this so that he can keep educating us to what goes wrong. We're here to learn. We don't have to, we're here to learn, basically. So am I right, Charles, that I understood it was a fairly somewhat easy procedure to treat those infected samples, and they weren't for money reasons?
Okay, well, I'll explain, but you've done brilliantly. And can you say I didn't properly answer your question before, stupid me, but I'll tell you what it was. How many people are affected from the blood transfusion side, right? So we've got 1,400 haemophilia deaths. We've got, we believe, 1,750 haemophiliacs infected, tens of thousands of Australians infected with hepatitis C from blood transfusion, tens of thousands. The government will only admit, in 2004, they admitted that there were up to 8,000 survivors, but they didn't say how many people were killed. And if you applied the same thing that they're doing with COVID, okay, where they basically, someone dies dies of a heart attack and they put it down as COVID and all these things that have been going on, if you applied that same thing with Hep C, I think we're looking at probably the world's worst medical scandal right here in Australia. And you know why? Everybody, get ready for this. No one did the things that Australia did. And that's from lawyers overseas at this international inquiry. No one did the crazy things they did. And actually, part of the problem was this. You were talking before about these legal indemnities, okay? Now, in 30 years of looking at this contaminated blood scandal, I've come up with something because I've thought about it so much. I've thought about this. How could anyone knowingly allow a patient to receive a tainted anything. Come on, we're all human beings here. I just don't believe it. It's just too macabre, too awful to want to consider, but we've got to. Why have we got to? Well, we're being asked to take these things and trust these people. So before accepting these things, we've got to do our due diligence. And so what I found was that basically when they were making these blood products for children with haemophilia and for adults with this bleeding disorder haemophilia, what the issue was this. This was what they call a mass pooled blood product. And so this factor VIII product that they gave to these haemophiliacs could be made in Australia from as many as 7,000 different donors. Okay, 7,000 different people donating blood plasma, and they take this protein out and they make this factor VIII product, right? And what they could do is, this thing doesn't have to be about blood types. Okay, so they can actually heat treat it. They can put it in a vat, and they can use solvents and chemical treatment. They can heat treat it, blast it, and they knew that you can actually kill viruses when you heat treat it for a little bit, right? So if anyone's thinking about how they make alcohol, when you make alcohol, you do things like that. You lose some. You lose a little bit when the more you heat it. You lose. Right. So yield, they call it yield, don't they?
Yeah.
So as I'm looking through the evidence about what went wrong, why did they allow these children? I mean, Bryce Courtney, the famous author, if he was alive today, I'd be hugging him because I'd say, Bryce, we've got to the bottom of it, mate. We now know what killed your son, Damon. And it was that basically this is a criminal negligence case, because why they did it, the Australian Red Cross and CSL got together and they didn't want to pay the money because they estimated that if they heat treated, they'd lose yield. Well, they were profit obsessed. CSL were profit obsessed. Even though they're a government agency, they were behaving like big tobacco. And they said unacceptable. They said there hasn't been enough pressure from the media to do something about HIV or heat treat or do any of that. And now they want us to heat treat. It's going to raise costs. We're not having it. And they said, this is far too big a cost. And they said, apart from that, it would involve changes to their protocols and the way that they did things. And so they felt it best to just wait. And this is what you'll find with so many things. It's just let the show keep on going. What is that show? That show is billions of dollars. It's public health. And they don't want the show to be on pause for anything. And so public safety goes down the tube, and they kept on going. Well, the next thing you know, boom, suddenly you've got famous cases of people dying of AIDS, and suddenly they're covering up. And we're still here today trying to get to the bottom of it. The problem is this, though. I reckon it's because of these legal indemnities and the remote nature of what they do. They're creating things in a lab. They don't get to see you. And that's what I've worked out. When your doctor's prescribing these things, what does the doctor know? In the old days, the doctor might have had a hand in creating the medicine. He might know what's in there, what formula. But they're reliant on these laboratories, thousands of miles away in some cases, right? Where these people are thinking about profit and loss and yield. And I think that's the problem. That's what's gone wrong. And now they've got no accountability. So why wouldn't they? Well, I'd hope that no human being would ever want to do that to somebody else. But they're so far away, they can't even look in our eyes. You know what? To some extent, they don't even know that we exist as people. We exist as numbers.
Mm-hmm. That's right. That's right. And the reason, guys, this is really important because it's something that we can apply to the current issues that we're going through here. Also, can I just point out, guys, for the sake of not having issues on my page and my platform, I tend to use initials and I won't use the full COVID word. I don't use any of the names for getting, I'll just say the word V instead. So be mindful, like that's probably what I'm referring to. You can ask in the questions because they don't end up going into the final video, and I will answer if you're, anyways. So the point is, guys, at the moment, so Charles is bringing up the moral dilemmas that are occurring from a corporate level and being passed all the way down to the average human, you and I, and lacking basically the integrity disappearing as it dribbles down the chain to the average human, the integrity just kind of falling apart on its way down here. The reason I find this is important, and what I'm trying to hopefully get you guys to see, I want you to think about this. When we're little and we're innocent children, we are so innocent, we can't even perceive that corruption is a real thing. When someone says, think about the first time in your life that someone said, a policeman did such and such. And we literally, as children, as innocent beings, we respond with, no, they wouldn't do that. However, guys, we're not innocent little kids anymore. We're grown up, corruption is real, and we need to be ready to actually confront and face that, accept that as a reality. If we don't accept that as something that's actually going on, then we can't expect corruption to just go away. And this is what it is on every level of Charles's story. He has experienced corruption after corruption after corruption. And the scary part is the names that he's referencing, the businesses and corporations that he's referencing, we trust those. We trust them with our lives, with our children. I mean, the Red Cross was one that he referenced, and they're covering up infected blood samples and blood transfusions to innocent children that died from AIDS and HIV. The other one was CSL, which, by the way, everyone that hasn't connected this dot, that business there is the very business that manufactures the V that everybody's getting at the moment, the one called AZ. So that one that everyone's getting called AZ, that's the same company that did this decades ago. And now they're pumping out the V en masse to everyone possible. We need to come to terms with the fact corruption is real. We're not innocent kids anymore. So we need to really confront this happens on every level. And once we accept this happens on every level, we are finally walking through life with our eyes and our ears wide open and ready to actually stand up for ourselves. Otherwise, this happens again and again and again. It should never have happened to Charles. It should never have happened to any innocent children. And I'm here trying to help Charles spread his story so that it does not happen to you nor your kids. And
what you were saying, that was really good. When you're talking about corruption, about trickling down. Now, what I want to say about that, you put that so well, right? Because what I want to say about this is, okay, is if the government are my opponent in this, right? But I'm a very different opponent for them. And I'll say this why, because I always use critical thinking, and I've had to use it to survive. Now, when you're talking about trickling down, what's important about that is think about some of the bureaucrats and some of the officials involved, right? Mm-hmm. I'm not saying that they're all of them sitting around a table maliciously conspiring against Australia. No. What I'm saying is with the corruption trickling down, what it is that someone has actually corruptly meddled with one of the cogs. And so the other systems are affected, and perhaps they think they're doing a good job. And the other thing I want to say about this is what they do. And I want to say something else. Money can blind people to what they're doing. And I don't mean to say that they're personally getting money. Sometimes these companies like CSL and the Red Cross, the great shock is that in the 1980s, these were survived on taxpayer money. But when you look into their documents, and if anyone watching tonight would like to go to infectedbloodaustralia.com, you can see the evidence. There on our website, we've got a section called the evidence they didn't want you to see. But you can actually see, if you look into them, that they actually felt like they were taught like corporations. Everything's about profit and loss.
Yeah.
Okay. And so here's the point that I'm making. They did get it wrong. They know that they've got it wrong. You know, there was a global contaminated blood scandal, right? The Canadian Red Cross made the same mistakes that our Australian Red Cross did. But because they had a legal inquiry, a legal investigation, the Canadian Red Cross were removed from the management of Canada's blood supply. There's been no legal investigation here, and they did exactly the same things, right? And the same number of people died proportionately, if not more. And in Australia, they've been given pats on the back, and CSL have been given the contract to make whatever, AZ, and more billions of our taxpayer money. Now think about that. They were given billions to make these blood products. They were allowed to be privatized. Former executives who were public servants who were with the company then made hundreds of millions of dollars. Children have died. 1,400. It's the worst treatment scandal. Can you think of any other treatment that it infected 100% of people that used it? It was the very worst thing that happened. And guess what? That company's here, and they're now we're to trust them all again. Well, here's my point. I had a chat the other day, and I think his name was Oliver. It was funnily named Oliver Beerthanks. Oliver Beerthanks. Okay. Well, Oliver Beerthanks. I've got my empty non-alcohol beer, by the way. Oliver Beerthanks. Oliver Beerthanks said to me, "This was 30 years ago. You know, this is decades ago. Well, Oliver Beer, thanks. I've got something to tell you, and it's called the law. We've got an outstanding warrant for the Australian Red Cross and CSL under duty of candor. Why did they not warn the recipients of their blood products? Why did they not warn the public of this scandal? The Australian Red Cross lifeblood, ultimately, I think, are going to be removed and should be removed from the management of Australia's blood supply. Why? Failure to tell us these things, it doesn't exactly engender trust. You need to do this. You know, if we were flying aircraft and planes went missing, we'd be asking for the black box. We'd need to know what happens. Not always because to find fault. You know, it doesn't mean to say we have to blame someone. No, it's because we need to have answers. It's not always to blame. It's just so people can have the peace of mind of knowing. And so before we've even got the peace of mind of knowing what lay behind Australia's deadliest medical scandal, contaminated blood, why did people with haemophilia receive contaminated blood products? We haven't even had a chance to look at that. And straight away, we're onto this huge project, which is everyone in Australia must roll up their sleeves to have yet more products made by this company, CSL.
Yeah, it's mind blowing. It's really mind blowing. It blows my mind. Guys, again, I keep trying to connect this back to what we're going through today because there's so much value and opportunity for growth and opportunity to learn from Charles's story. This happened when it should never have happened, is my point. And we are kind of stepping into the same accidental, so we're watching the same channel all over again, and it's blowing my mind. Charles brought up a point earlier that he's always been a critical thinker. I've always been a critical thinker. I think I could write literally A+ English essays with my eyes closed on the night before it was due. I loved that stuff. However, what I love doing now is really helping you guys even activate that critical thinking. And this is part of it. This is questioning where your information comes from, why it's got that particular spin on it. Ask questions, guys. And also, for anyone that is watching right now and you're from Charles's platform or you're one of his followers and you don't know what I do, I'm an energetic coach, an empowerment priestess. Basically, I reconnect people to their intuition because your body is so intelligent. That's why you get gut feelings all the time. You know when someone's giving you BS and you know when someone's sitting in truth. So it's so important that we begin to sit back, connect to our soul level intuition again, because you will know what's a little bit funky. And everything that Charles went through, that did
It'll
not
save your life.
happen. It absolutely.
What you said, what you just said there, that saved my life because all the words that anyone could think of when they do these interviews or these chats, you know, like these academics that sell you what you should do with your health. I can't give you any of that, but I can tell you this, that gut instinct that Evelyn was just speaking of, when I was a kid, it just hinged on one thing and one thing alone, right? It went like this. How come they did nothing to help that kid that I went to school with? And he's dying of AIDS, and they really made a thing. They actually made a point of not helping him, right?
Yeah.
And just, you know, okay, so that really affected me. I knew at that moment, I thought, that's not Australia, that's weird. And by the way, we found the reason for that. Did you know?
No. Go, fill us in.
Well, it's a bit of a scoop.
All right, go on, bring us the scoop, Charles. What happened?
But I'll tell you, I don't mean to be a twit by saying that, by the way, but I mean to say in the sense that it's actually good that we're mentioning it tonight because it's in the right company, okay? So the scoop is the British government were involved. They wanted the Australian government to go hard on this kid because if that kid had won that case, if that little boy died, it would have blown the whole thing up about the British government having lied. And they've been involved in these products came to Australia along with British health ideas and policies and British specialists. And then bang, it would have exposed the whole British operation. And I'm sure one day they'll make a movie about how a little boy faced not just the Australian government. I mean, who would have thought you'd have the humanitarian agency, the Australian Red Cross, up against a little kid in the 1980s with AIDS? And now we know, as we go into the evidence, the British government. It wasn't Australia. Australia wouldn't have done that left to their own devices. It was the British government on the phone. And there's got to be an investigation into how much British taxpayers' money was spent taking on a little boy with AIDS in Australia. I can't believe, you know, when I saw the evidence of the legal collusion, that was only about, say, 4 years ago, I think. And I sat there for a moment. I thought, this has got to be that kid I went to school with, because I'm looking through these documents. I thought, and I went to look at how many court cases were happening for little boys with AIDS. And there was only one at that time in 1989. And I realized, wow, in these documents, the British are fighting this kid's legal case. Oh my goodness. What a scandal. And that's another big thing about this infected blood scandal, the misuse of public monies. Okay. So they're spending our tax dollars. How do you feel about that? How do you feel about going to work to pay for the Australian government colluding with the British government that wants to go up against a little boy dying of AIDS? And so how does this have relevance for today? They haven't accounted for it. And so that same conduct, that same behavior, ask yourself this question. If we are going to think critically, ask yourself this question. What deterrent would there be? What deterrent would there be for them not to do this again? They're not going to look you in the eyes. They're not going to be the ones that knock on the door and say, by the way, your child has died. No, it's fire and forget. I'm sorry, or jab and forget, or whatever you want to say. And by the way, in the process, they're making enormous amounts of money. And I just want to say this. I might have the name wrong. So yesterday I was horrified to learn that there was this organization, I think called, is it the Burnett Institute? Again,
I'm not sure.
Well, anyway, without getting anything wrong and doing anything naughty, but this institute have been helping the government shape its policy on what to do with, this situation we're in, this crisis, this public health crisis. And that organization, which is a not-for-profit, has their money, they've bumped up by $200 million or something. So I give advice that sees Australian taxpayers locked down for 2 years, kept away from their dying relatives like myself at this very moment. I mean, how disgusting. I would go to war, and I'm not a violent person, but you know what I mean? You get what I'm saying? I'd go to war never to have that happen. We did. We had people fight for us to never have that sort of thing happen.
Yep.
Okay, that's the whole reason for Australia being how we are. And we don't do this sort of thing. We don't. And so it would have to be a bloody good reason, wouldn't it, for us to be doing this sort of thing.
Exactly.
And you find out, actually, that the reason is very dubious. And you find out that one of the not-for-profits, the academic sort of think tanks that Prime Minister Scott Morrison was speaking of as, I think it's the Burnett Institute or whatever it's called, and they constantly refer, using them as the sort of, the plausible excuse, the plausible deniability that, that this is anything other than a power grab or a cash grab or whatever it is, right?
Yeah.
This organisation's had $200 million to give advice to have us all locked down.
It's mind-blowing. That's part of what we're talking about in terms of corruption, guys. When money is used rather than to serve or protect or do anything which I would consider in alignment and full of integrity, when it's used for cover-up, that's not normal. That's not okay. And it doesn't mean just because it has happened before, now's the time to normalize it. Don't ever allow this to be the norm, guys, because it affects our children. And it should never have affected Charles decades ago. This should never affect your kids today or yourselves today. This is not the way we're meant to conduct any business. And the reason in going back to critical thinking, you want to ask questions, guys, because there's something really sus when the GOVT, as well as the manufacturers of every V out there that they're trying to push onto you or into your arm, as well as every employer that's been forced to only have employees that have taken a V of any brand, if none of them are holding themselves accountable or responsible if you have adverse reactions or if anything happens to you, literally even to the point of death, if they're not taking responsibility for that, what does that tell you? If the manufacturer themselves aren't even going to take responsibility for the impact of their product having on your health, potentially on your life, what does that tell you? These are the questions that you need to ask instead of respectfully, I mean this respectfully, Kate, but instead of blindly following any authority and going, okay, they just told me to, okay, they just told me to. If anybody's telling you to anything, get them to back what they're saying. And this is something I teach my clients. I get them to a point of following their intuition so sharply that I tell them, you know what, now you run with that, even if that overrides what I'm saying, because I want you to trust that more than anything else in the world. So we really have to question when we're at a point that they're so forcefully and coercing and manipulating, where they're so forcefully trying to shove a particular way of life onto us, or a particular experiment or whatever brand of that they're trying to shove onto us. Why is nobody taking accountability or responsibility the minute you've had it done? Then you're all on your own. If you are convulsing, if you have any life-threatening or adverse side effects, why isn't even the manufacturer, why isn't anyone going to take responsibility for that? Because that kind of product right there, I'm not up for it. I'm not putting that in me. I'm not up for that. If you come with a lot more assurance, maybe, but there's zero assurance and a whole lot of force. And we don't want to stay blind to that, because that's how these things happen. And it happened decades ago to Charles. It will continue to happen. We don't want to see this when our kids are adults and they're having to fight a fight that we just didn't fight now.
It's never stopped happening. It's because they haven't addressed Australia's deadliest medical scandal, contaminated blood. It's because there's never been a legal investigation, which you can support by going to our bio. If you go to the bio, Infected Blood Australia's Instagram page, or you go to infectedbloodaustralia.com, you can actually support our call for a Royal Commission of Inquiry into the Australian Red Cross CSL blood scandal, right? And I promise you, actually, Evelyn, I've really enjoyed this chat. I really have, actually, because actually, you've given me an idea. You're talking about critical thinking. Well, with your audience, and anyone watching this video later, put me to the test. Put Infected Blood Australia to the test. Don't just put the government to the test. Always remember, of course, put the activists to the test. What are their intentions? What are they up to? Okay, well, I'll tell you straight up what my intentions are. I want that Royal Commission. I've wanted it for decades, all right? Okay, all right, and I want help for our affected families.
Yeah,
okay.
Do you know what's beautiful about this, guys, is when you activate and engage the critical thinking that you actually naturally have, until social conditioning tells you to turn it off, don't ask questions, just blindly listen to authority. But when you reactivate that, because it was inside you, so when you reactivate that, guys, you will find your intuition will sharpen, but you'll also find people that are telling the truth aren't actually encouraging you to not ask them questions. So exactly like Charles said, ask him as many questions as you want. And I highly encourage you to jump into his DMs as soon as we're done here. Jump into his DMs and ask him for the exact link that he can send you for anything that you need us to sign up to support your cause, Charles. And that way people aren't kind of trying to find their way around the site. Just hit us up with the exact link. Everybody just hit him up in the DMs. He'll cut and paste, as will I. I'll send you the exact cut and paste link. But when people are telling the truth, they invite questions. The amazing part, guys, is that science is based on asking questions. If you want to understand how the neuron relates to the electron and how they relate to an atom, guess what? We ask questions. We run a series of experiments so that we can collate data, which then shows us a pattern, and now we have a formula. That's how science works. Science says ask questions. The GOVT is saying don't ask questions. Is that not sus in itself? Very suspicious. But if people don't have anything to hide, they hide nothing. I had Charles, on that note, I had a really cool moment the other day where in the spirit of activating critical thinking, I had one of my own beautiful followers asked me a question which kind of doubted something I'd said. And I noticed a part of me that was like, oh, as if I would lie about it. But then I got so proud. So at first, guys, I was triggered for a second. And then I got so proud because I realized, no, you know what? She's doing exactly what I've been trying to tell people to do. So I said to her, here's where I found that. Here's how I know this. By the way, I love that you asked. I love that you came at me with queries, because that's how we learn, guys. That's how we learn. Follow your intuition, even if it overrides what I'm saying.
Well, okay, here's one for the audience. I mean, I'm going to ask people to come with me on a journey, right? And we can all do it together, okay? All of us, okay? They go like this. Question number one. I'm saying that contaminated blood is Australia's deadliest ever medical scandal. The reason I'm saying it is the scale of the casualties. On numbers alone, if we do the mathematics alone, okay, that's what my claim is. Okay, number of people infected, number of people killed. And I'm saying that with incomplete information, by the way, because the government, it just never ever speaks about it, right? Okay, so what is Australia's deadliest medical scandal? Okay, that's it. And the other thing too is the government says that I'm a liar. Okay, they're saying that they are partially admitting that there were thousands of people infected from the blood supply, okay? But that you won't see it listed anywhere. But there was a Senate committee, a ridiculous Senate committee that had a look at it in 2004, and the government admitted, okay, there's 8,000 survivors, right? Now, what did that happen? The government says that happens through best science advice and best health advice. Best science advice by best health advice. Really? Well, in Canada, they did the same things that Australia did, and their Red Cross was booted out of the management of the blood supply because they had legal investigation. A legal investigation in Ireland found similar problems, and one in the UK that's happening now is definitely not finding best science advice. They're finding lies. The British authorities lied about the safety of their blood supply in 1974 and lied about the safety of blood products in 1974. Had they not done that, we might never have had contaminated blood in Australia. We might never have had Bryce Courtney's son dying of AIDS from that blood product that came from the UK. Do you understand? The British murdered Bryce Courtney's son. It was their failure to do the right thing. It's like an aviation. You get someone who doesn't do their job maintaining the aircraft. He covers that up because he doesn't want anyone to know, and then because he didn't do his job, that bearing in the landing gear doesn't work. It comes down to land, bang, the thing doesn't operate, and boom, we've now got an aviation investigation, but at least we've got a black box. And what I'm saying is this: if the government won't talk about Australia's deadliest medical scandal, contaminated blood, I don't think they'll be wanting to talk about adverse reactions to an experimental jab if any of this goes wrong. And I just want you to know that I've had plenty of evidence that it's gone wrong. Okay? Plenty of evidence it's gone wrong.
I recently, I've shared a story, guys, recently. It was about someone that had had an adverse reaction, and my DMs, which I wasn't actually expecting, my DMs were flooded with people that personally know someone that has had an adverse reaction. One gorgeous follower of mine said, 23 people, that's how many people I personally know that have had an adverse reaction to this. Now, that's mind-blowing. That's some kind of lottery number there, because you shouldn't know, guys, you shouldn't know one. That's how much you're supposed to trust the quality of the product that someone is pumping into your body. You shouldn't have one adverse reaction. So for one single follower of mine to know 23, that's a lot. Yesterday I was chatting to a friend who's a mother at her kid's school has passed away after having one of the V's. You've got to question what level of risk we're willing to take, and really, guys, that's some level of risk. When the risk is death, that's some level of risk, guys.
Well, the same
and no one's going to own it. No one's going to own that. That's what you might end up experiencing.
The same creeps that are covering up the contaminated blood scandal are the same public health monsters that are coercing people. Now, the thing is, if this, what gets me about this, I have to say, is I've actually also got bone marrow failure and a compromised immune system. So, as I've said before, if anyone should be really worried about this scenario, it should be me. And I'm not reckless. I do a lot of things to build my immunity, but being coerced into something that could possibly be manufactured by a company that's lying about the death of 1,400 people in Australia, many of whom are friends, I'm not going for it, okay? Yeah. And so, I just hope that people, whatever their choice, can understand that we are talking about a business, and it's a business that's been indemnified. There's no downside for them, apart from the moral downside, because they're not going to have to pay any money. And will they really care? They don't know who you are. You're just a number. So that's my point. Yeah. It's tainted blood. This is potentially tainted blood all over again.
Yeah. A business that truly has your best interest in mind, guys, will care, meaning they will be held accountable and they will take responsibility for the quality of their product or their service. And no one's doing anything like that to any of the brands of V that they're trying to force you into getting. Can I also point out, because I do this in my stories regularly, in my posts regularly, guys, I'm not anti-V. I'm not. I'm pro-choice, I'm pro-sovereignty. And that means that no one should govern your mind, body, or soul. Do you know what's happened? They've begun governing, they've taken control of the mind, early 2020. They're really trying hard to get at your body. Next level is soul, guys. You become robotic because you're not activating any critical thinking. You're just doing what you're told at that point, and that's incredibly dangerous. If you don't register that's dangerous for you intuitively, it's incredibly dangerous for your children. And here's the thing, I don't even have kids yet. It's probably a good thing I keep saying, because it's just, I feel very passionately about this, and it enrages me, is why. To hear that this happened to Charles as a child, and he's still, guys, to this decades ago, and he's still trying to seek justice. That's messed up.
Yeah, well, that's the thing about on the thing of people having children or not. I'm just going to say one thing. All we have to do, this is what we've done. We've allowed the wrong people to be in charge of public health. We've allowed them to create a Wild West for themselves. They get the money, they get all the good. They're not out of work. They're having a fine old time these last 2 years. Imagine if they were locked down. Okay,
Yeah.
we've allowed them to allow Wild West for health. Okay, I've had all my jabs. I've had all my whatever you want to call them. I haven't had this one. Why haven't I? Well, because it's not proper medicine. It hasn't been through the rigorous trials that I demand, and I demand for others. And a lot of Australians, I don't know anybody that's been supportive of what's happened, actually. You know why? Because you just said it earlier. You're talking about we've got this, we've got a gut instinct. If we listen to it, and it goes like this. When someone puts a gun to my head and says, you're going to lose your job or you won't get to see your loved one again, and calls it medicine, I'm sorry, but I've read the children's fables. I know, I've seen, Wizard of Oz and all of that stuff. I know that's not good. And when you pull back the curtain, who are these people doing it? You find out they've been earning money for the last 2 years and you haven't been. Okay?
Yeah, the people that are pushing this, guys, let's just say there are industries that are very comfortable by continuing to nudge us in the wrong direction, into harm, into the direction of harm. And that includes, for example, every journalist that is giving you this side of the story instead of this other side of the story. Everything you're seeing on the news, guys, be aware there's a lot more to be told. Even today, when healthcare workers...
Ita Buttrose, sorry to interrupt, but you're saying, even today with health workers, 1985, a trusted icon saying the haemophilia treatments were purified. Sorry to interrupt that, I was being rude there, but I'm showing your audience, about trust. Please go on.
Just because they're on TV, guys, doesn't mean you should automatically believe everything that's being said, because there's a lot that's not being said, and that lot that is not being said doesn't suit the current narrative. And I'll give you an example of that, because last week, and by the way, big love to everyone, because last week was heavy. It was a lot to process. It was a lot to take in, especially here in Melbourne with all the protests going on in the city. But what you will notice is that here in Melbourne, they didn't want any aerial views, no media up in the helicopters. They didn't want any aerial views because it would expose just how massive the protests were. They began to pretend like it was small. It was huge, guys. It was massive. To anyone that's not in Melbourne, it was huge, trust me. And they didn't want aerial. They even banned media helicopters up there because they don't want to show you how big a deal, how many people are truly fighting back. However, today, when the healthcare workers were out there protesting in one of the city gardens, then they showed the aerial view to show that it's just a peppering. You don't have to worry about these guys. In fact, no one's even really doing this. And they also said, observe the language, guys. They said people who claimed to be healthcare workers. So when it suits them, when it suits someone, they will discredit you guys. They will discredit you hard. And this is an easy one for women to relate to, because if someone wants to discredit you, they call you hysterical so that no one listens to you. They're just like, oh, don't listen to that. Oh, even Charles, for example, they might be like, don't listen to Charles. He's lost the plot. He's hysterical, etc. That's what happens because they don't want to hear the rest of what he has to say, which should have you questioning, why don't they want me to hear the rest of what this person has to say? I'm all ears now.
Yeah, that's it. Well, the thing is, what I'll say to them is, I get the one for them, they're too passionate. But, funnily about discrediting people, when I started campaigning for contaminated blood, they actually didn't admit that any of this had happened. And so a lot of contaminated blood victims lived under the stigma that they must have got it through some, other conduct, perhaps sharing needles or something like that, right?
Yeah.
And so for some people, that was a huge blow. And the government were very happy to keep them in that lockdown of that of that world of saying this never happened. So people just didn't talk about it, right?
Yeah.
So all I just got to say to this audience tonight is this: why doesn't the government talk about the contaminated blood scandal? Why don't they ever do that? Why doesn't the humanitarian agency, the Red Cross, help victims? Why don't they help families? Why doesn't the blood products and jab maker, CSL, makers of the AZ, why don't they help anyone? And you find out the reason is because legal indemnities, okay? So all I can say is this: if you do accept this experimental treatment, I'm not supporting them, by the way, but if you do, understand it's a bit like a relationship with the CIA. You've been recruited by some sort of agency that's going to disavow all responsibility and knowledge of you when it goes on. You are on your own.
Yeah.
And what's more, you won't even get, listen to this, it's very possible that you might not even get the love and support of the people around you, because after it goes wrong, they're not going to be there to say that it happened. They're going to say there's no evidence, there's no evidence. There's going to be potentially a rise of autoimmune diseases, a rise of inflammatory diseases, and they're going to be long gone over on the horizon, drinking a martini somewhere in, I don't know, Monaco or somewhere like that.
Yeah. Guys, that's a really good analogy, guys. If I'm going to use another one because it's very everyday relatable, but if you were looking to buy a car and you walked into particular brand or make, particular showroom, and they said, oh, you can take these cars, even though you've heard some of these cars are exploding on the roads, do not buy that car. Do not buy that car. Don't put yourself in that vehicle, because you're getting the reverse of that. You're getting something that might just it could implode in a big way. That said, sorry, I just want to go back to, I completely respect anyone that's already had it, anyone that's wanting to get it, that's fine. However, we need to make sure that we're living in a country where you have the choice. Some people don't want this in their bodies. Some people have great reason for not wanting this in their bodies, but we need the choice, because not only is the choice being taken, how suspicious is this, but no one's taking responsibility for everything that is going wrong. And that's not being, it's not being spoken about on the news. I'm not going to get into that, but guys, I'm aware that, I think that in about 5 minutes, because Charles, I have loved this chat, but I think if I go past the 1 hour mark, I may lose all of this awesome information. So we're going to wrap up. If there's anything that you want to add, Charles, in about 1 or 2 minutes so that we don't lose the whole live, pop it in here now, because I want everyone to take away as much as they can from your story.
Okay, well, what it is this, take heart, everyone, because what we've got to do is bring the law back into play. They've created a Wild West for themselves, for Big Pharma, and some reprehensible public health officials. But if you can help me, I can help you back. If you go to our bio and support that Royal Commission of Inquiry, and I can help you back, and our group can help you back, by when we expose this. We're next in line, everybody. We've got the lawyers. We just need your support. We've got the evidence. We just need your support. We're going to stop mandated anything. You know why? Because safety must be paramount in healthcare. And when you mandate things against people's will, you lose out on safety. And I'm not going to support that. And I know that you won't. So thank you for having me, Evelyn. It's been fantastic. I really enjoyed it. I think you've got a fantastic way of thinking. I really do. I really enjoyed it. And great. We'll talk again.
Thank you so much, Charles. I loved that as well. So if anybody wants to drop into Charles' DMs, do it now. Do it as soon as we get off. Do it right now. Drop into his DMs and ask him for the exact link that will help his cause, and you can go in there and sign up to whatever he needs us to sign up to, because this should never have happened then. It should not be happening right now. And I do not, as someone who doesn't even have kids, I do not want this to happen to your kids or the kids I intend on having in different conditions, guys. So just, hit us up in the DMs. I'll grab the link off Charles as well. So head to either of us and we can really support his cause, because this should have never happened. Do not normalize this. Thank you so much to everyone that jumped in tonight. Oh, hello guys. Some people I love in here. Thanks to everyone that joined us tonight. Please head over to our DMs and do go and follow Charles's page. It's called Infected Blood AU, because there's so much valuable insight in there, guys. It's such an opportunity to learn. This should never have happened. Beautiful. Thank you. Awesome, guys. Thank you so much for jumping in. I'm going to upload this in a couple of minutes and not lose it all. Have a beautiful night, everyone. Thank you so much, Charles.
Bye. See you. It was good to meet you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.